In this lecture, we are going to start macro expansion. Hi, Professor D. Kosti, welcome you. Macro expansion. So, when does macro expansion happen? Macro expansion takes place when a macro call is done. When the macro call is done whenever we want to expand particular function like code, which is there in the macro definition. So where does that macro call exist? Macro call exists in the main program. So what is happening in macro expansion? Whenever a macro call is generated, the macro expansion happens and all the statements which are there in the macro definition are taken from that particular definition and put into the main program. So during macro expansion, we say the macro call statement is replaced by a sequence of assembly statements. Now to differentiate between the original statements of a program and the statements resulting from the macro expansion, each expanded statement is marked with a plus preceding its label field. So we will see this slide using the example. So this is a macro call. So macro call leads to macro expansion. So this is what macro expanded. So instead of this line, new expanded code is generated, that is more, add and move. These three statements are included in the main program. So from the macro, these three important statements which are carrying some operation are expanded here. Now, how to identify the original statement of the program and expanded statement of the program? This is solved using a plus sign before its label field. So this plus indicates that move, add and move, these three statements are expanded from the macro. Otherwise, start, A, B, print, stop and end are the original statements of the program. So this is already we know A, B are real, ampersand A, ampersand B are the formal. How this happens? A is assigned to ampersand A, B is assigned to ampersand B, A register is by default A register. So depending on that, everything is changed. I hope you understood slide number 1. Let us go to the next slide. That is key notions concerning macro expansion. First one is macro expansion time control flow. Second one is lexical substitution. So expansion time control flow determines the order in which model statements are visited during macro expansion. So by default, order is sequential if there is no preprocessor statement. So line by line, each and every statement is visited in the macro. And what is lexical substitution? Lexical substitution is used to replace formal parameters with actual parameters. So actual parameters are there in the macro call and formal parameters are there in the macro definition. The flow of control during expansion. I just told you that the flow is by default sequential. This flow of control will alter if there is some preprocessor statement. Now, what preprocessor statement will do? A preprocessor statement can alter flow of control during expansion such that some model statements are either visited repeatedly or some model statements are never visited because these preprocessor statements can make the control to jump to a particular statement. The flow of control during macro expansion is implemented using a MEC, macro expansion counter. So that we are going to see how the MEC is implemented using an algorithm. So this example we have just discussed. So lexical expansion means what I'll tell you. This is the list of formal parameters and this is the list of actual parameters. So this ampersand A is replaced with actual parameter, that is A. This ampersand B is replaced with for actual parameter B. A register is by default A register. This replacement is called as lexical substitution. After that, By default, more register means a register, ampersand a means a, that is reflected here. More register a register a, then add register ampersand b. This ampersand b is nothing but p. Then move the result to the a, that is ampersand a, nothing but a. So this is how the macro expansion takes place. In this way, we have seen method how the macro expansion is performed. Thank you. The slide credit goes to Professor D.M. Damderi.